Dzień dobry, witam w strefie obrony. Dzisiaj w naszym studiu jest gość specjalny, a mianowicie jest nim pan generał, major rezerwy sił obronnych Izraela, dr Yacov Bengo. Generał Yacov Bengo spędził około 35 lat w mundurze sił obronnych Izraela, przechodząc wszystkie szczeble oficerskiej kariery, od szczebla taktycznego, operacyjnego, aż po strategiczny, bowiem swoją karierę zakończył jako szef zarządu planowania w sztabie generalnym izraelskich sił obronnych. Panie generale, bardzo proszę krótko przedstawić siebie dla oglądających nasz podcast.
Well, first of all, I'm very happy to be here. As you mentioned, I've served for 34 years in the IDF. That's mean that I enlisted in 1989, which the world was different than today. We still didn't have cellular phones those days, and the media was not as it was, and space was very far away. Even cyber attack, nobody knew what it was in 1989. During my days of service, going up the ranks, I met the Joint Staff. The world has changed, and suddenly more domains became more familiar. And I think my endeavor, which I also wrote it about my book, and that was my life mission in the IDF itself, was how to combine those new technologies inside the armed forces in order to be better than the enemy, like everybody wants to be. And during those times, I understood that writing is very important for generals, although we don't like to. So for me, writing was to educate my fellow friends in the IDF how to think about those problems and how to harness the technology and history together in order to have the fourth generation that they need to have. And so I was lucky to be able to do that and to share those thoughts with everybody else. The books were actually, I would say, I don't know, people ask me about it a lot. I think they were a mistake from my side. I didn't intend to write a book. I just wrote so much, and then my professor in the university says, you know, it's a book. Maybe start writing it as a book and just give it away. And that's how I entered to write the book. For me, they are complementary book. Although I didn't succeed to publish my first book in English, I will do that. But Cracking the Code, I'm very happy that it was published in English by the Air University Press in the United States. And it was really trying to show how thinkers of war are thinking about what is war. And because we always have a bias, or we're looking at one of them. For example, Israel is very tended to look just on Clausewitz. But there are a lot of more thinkers that needs to be think about when you're thinking about war, and it helps to figure out, I would say, the scale and what is war. And as I emphasize all the time when I'm talking about it, war is not warfare. And most of the time people are misunderstanding the two concepts.
Szanowny panie generale, bardzo mi miło gościć pana w naszym studio. Będziemy rozmawiać na temat wojny na Ukrainie. Więc przede wszystkim proszę powiedzieć, minęło już 1000 dni tej wojny. Wojna toczy się już przez ponad 1000 dni. Jakie generalne wnioski pan ze swojej perspektywy, wykorzystując całą swoją wiedzę, ogromne doświadczenie operacyjne, taktyczne, strategiczne, a także wiedzę akademicką, jakie główne wnioski może pan wyciągnąć z przebiegu tej wojny?
Well, first of all, I would say it's the return of the war and not the operation. Usually in the West we do differentiation between war and warfare, and we think warfare is a war, and war is not warfare. Although warfare became very complicated, but war is a different thing. I would say 3 main things that have changed. First of all, that war is not a boutique effort. We see national and masses of industrialization and mobilization of manpower. For example, we suddenly see the need for big reserve and trained reserve, and if you don't have them, then you have an attrition during the war because you don't have good commanders to lead the troops because they have died and you can't replace them. The second thing that you can see is the change of the battlefield itself. It's not more anymore a geometric battlefield, it's a space battlefield, and we relate to it in a minute. And I think the third one is the condense of the levels of war. There isn't anymore really a differentiation between the strategic, operational, and tactical levels. They are all combined together at the same time. And I think that's what the biggest three things that we see in the Ukraine war, and that's why it's such a big war and not a small warfare of operation. If we can see it in the slides that I like to see, if we can see the first slide, I usually like to, as I related to in my book, to Georgi Isselson. Can you do the next slide, please? Isselson was a thinker of the operational level. In 1932, he published his book. Thank you. It was a general in the Russian, in the Soviet Union army. And after World War II, he developed with other thinkers in the Russian army the way of how do you think of the operational of doing war. And what we can see here that already in 1932 they thought about long-range attack while doing the battlefield confrontation. So we see here in the slide like airplanes that are striking 1,000 kilometers in the depth of the country. We see the first movement of the troops that are meeting in the battlefield itself, and then we see the depth of the battlefield itself. And the amazing thing here is that in this war we only had three dimensions in World War II. So we have the land, the sea, and the air. When we go to the next slide, please, this is from the American books. This is how modern warfare looks like. We have it from space to cyber and information and all the good old things of the ground maneuvering. And we see that strategic depth fire, operational, and close area, they are all condensed in the same area of confrontation. So the battlefield itself, the front lines, are very condensed with all those kind of capabilities of the drone striking and long-range fires. We see the need for operation dealing with space. For example, we saw the Starlings suddenly of Elon Musk being very significant to this war, and suddenly tactical forces need to be able to talk with space element. And we saw the information capabilities, how they change the war and deception of the world. So this is the new warfare as we see it. We see that it ranges from 2,000 kilometers to very close fire of soldiers fighting the ground forces. We see it from space to cyberspace. So this is the new war that we see it. The other thing here that we can see that it involves the whole army and the whole state. When we talk about ranges of 2,000 kilometers, basically you're talking about the main cities of a country. You're talking about its critical assets and infrastructures, that they are all in the battlefield, and the battlefield is not contained anymore to the front lines and as we knew it. And that's why today we can see a lot of thinkers use it as they call the battle space instead of the battlefield. I would say that those are for the first key takeaway.
Panie generale, wojna rosyjsko-ukraińska trwa już blisko 3 lata. Przez ten czas ukazały się setki, jeśli nie tysiące przeróżnych publikacji, wywiadów, analiz dotyczących tego, w jaki sposób zmienia się pole walki podczas tego konfliktu, a także jak zmieniają się zdolności, które są niezbędne dla funkcjonowania współczesnych sił zbrojnych. Jak pan widzi właśnie ten aspekt ze swojej perspektywy, z perspektywy wysokiego rangą oficera Sił Obronnych Izraela? Mam na myśli przede wszystkim to, jakie zdolności są dzisiaj potrzebne, żeby skutecznie działać na wschodnioeuropejskim teatrze działań zbrojnych.
I think the biggest change from the old days to where we stand today is the need for national air defense. And I use this word and not air defense or I would say missiles against missiles or drone. And the biggest reason for national air defense is the ability to have the mainland of the country be able to handle regular life. What we saw in Ukraine in the start of the war is like more than 10 million people displaced. This is inconceivable for a modern country that it's people just living it. And we saw the harsh attack on very critical infrastructures that they take the country backwards, years. So it will take many years for the country to do reconstruction. So the ability to be able to defend the country, basic elements and critical elements is the biggest change. Without that, there's almost no importance for the offense capabilities, who really didn't change too much. So of course everybody is looking at the UAVs as big changes for the offense, which are very, very important. But if you can't defend from UAVs, then basically you come to sum up zero, because every attack that you do, the enemy does it yourself, and you get a sum up zero, and you cannot have a strategic value that helps you to win the war. In that manner, we even see Ukraine is a huge country compared, for example, to Israel. And we still see that the attacking of the electricity systems, all the communication system, and also the ability for people to live in Ukraine became so hard that we saw all this displacement. So I would say one biggest thing is to be able to defend from all those threats is a main thing. In Israel, it took us about 20 years to build that way of thinking, because we understood that there's no, I would say, equivalent between the achievement in the defense and the offense. If you do a good defense, then every offense counts more. If you do many good offenses, but you get a goal in the defense, then it's almost a sum of zero. It's more like a soccer. It's more like a soccer game when it doesn't important if the two teams, put goals. It's if you have a good goalkeeper, then you'll get the upper hand. So that's one main thing. The other thing is the need for a lot of unmanned system in order to have a huge mass of capabilities, because the threats and the need to strike are got in huge numbers. For example, a modern company or a modern battalion needs to have those kinds of assets in order to get targets in the battlefield that he does in his own tactical area. I would say that they need to have their own air force in that manner. So today, when I think about those things, I'm thinking about that every battalion needs to have like 100 drones of its own, just for his tactical missions in order to achieve, because the battlefield has so changed, and the concentration in the battlefield allows you to do those kind of things. So unmanned are the second thing. And the last one I would say is the communication capabilities that have changed, because you need to fuse a lot of information between the intelligence and the operation, between, I would say, the J3 branch and the J2 branch. And suddenly you have a lot of information that you need to decide what's important. And it's not anymore in the commander's head. He needs the computers, and computers needs communication. And we see a lot of communication interference. As I mentioned, Elon Musk and Starlink's, the need to have communication, but we also see commanders that are trying to fuse the communication in the computers in order to understand what's important and what's less important, and when to concentrate their effort. I would say those are the big things.
Panie generale, wspomniał pan o tym, że jedną z najważniejszych zdolności na współczesnym polu walki jest obrona powietrzna, obrona przeciwlotnicza i przeciwrakietowa. Wydaje mi się, że siły zbrojne Ukrainy obecnie użytkują tak wiele różnych systemów do zwalczania środków napadu powietrznego, że można spokojnie powiedzieć, iż wojska przeciwlotnicze są najbardziej zróżnicowane. Wykorzystują zaawansowane systemy zachodnie, jeszcze systemy posowieckie, czy systemy zachodnie starszej generacji, a także systemy zupełnie improwizowane. W jaki sposób zatem sama obrona powietrzna, sam sposób prowadzenia obrony powietrznej kraju zmienił się w toku konfliktu wojny na Ukrainie? Czy też może jakie wnioski z prowadzenia działań obronnych przez Ukraińców mogą wyciągnąć dowódcy sił zbrojnych innych państw?
Right. So if we can put the slide that another one, please. Yeah. So this is a schematic way of how the enemy does an attack. So we see that he is moving from long-range distances, like over 500 kilometers, to operational short range and to tactical short range. And of course, it fires it to the blue territory, as we see here. And we can see he engages the whole ranges, the whole distance of places, like from tactical to the long range. Now, one of the things that people usually don't understand, in the old way of us thinking about those problems, it was military against military. So we hold the military or the units, operational units, hold missile defense just to, make sure that the airplane of the enemy won't shoot them. But today you have to defend the whole infrastructure of the country in order to do that. So the way to do it, if we can go to the next slide, is understanding the blue territory, and I did here the bubbles to show the need to do defense while doing the attack. So you cannot do just one of them. And when we talk about the air defense operation, we have to understand that there are multi-services operation. I'll expand on it immediately, and they involve the whole country. So, for example, just to show, if you don't involve the civilian community in those operations, then it doesn't matter that you do a defense. So, in Israel, for example, we have almost 200 what we call polygons of alerts in order to alert the citizens when to take cover, because you don't want them to get harmed. So they have to be part of the defense itself. In Yom Kippur War, for example, in 1973, the whole country of Israel was one polygon. So when you did the alert, all the country was under alert. Today, we are able to take the country into 200 sections and to tell, I don't know, for example, in Tel Aviv, be undercover, and in Jerusalem, not. It's very important. So the civilian are part of the national defense system. To be able to alert the civilians, you have to have the army or the armed forces to be able to understand where the threats are coming. So they have to have a very good air surveillance from space to radar for long ranges, as we see it over here, and to be connected with the intelligence where and who is firing in order to tell the civilians where to take cover or not. So first of all, we're talking about a level of the joint forces, of the joint staff, in order that they need to do the whole organization, first of all, in their level, from the upper levels, before we go into the lower levels. So that's one thing. So that it takes a huge amount of effort, also intellectual, but also the cultural of how to do a defense. The second thing is why it needs to be in the joint staff level. It's because the joint staff is very near to the strategic level of the country, and they need to decide what to defend first. For example, our banks before hospital, our hospitals before electricity station, just for exaggeration. So when you have this kind of directive, you know which to defend first, and then when to defend last, and then the whole understanding of of all this effort that we see from the red area that are coming to against the blue area. The third one, I would say, is the combined operation. So, first of all, we have missile against missile. This is the old-fashioned way, meaning that I attack the threats in the sky, which is very important. But then I would say the other value is how the attack elements are going after the elements that are shooting at your country itself. So those are like, I would say, classic intelligence Air Force operation for deep attacks in those areas in order to prevent from the red side to shoot on the blue side. So to sum it up, if I can, those are three levels of operation. First of all, it's the joint staff with the strategic level, that they are combining the civilian level and what's important for the nation itself. The second thing is the capability of doing defense against the threats themselves. So those are hard kills, just we see like in Iron Dome or the Arrow system. And then the third one is to tune the lower level of operational level in the armed forces themselves to prevent from shooting, which requires them to have a very good intelligence and to have very good capabilities to integrate the intelligence to the attacking capabilities to prevent from shooting to the country.
Panie generale, bardzo dziękuję. Chciałem zapytać jeszcze o jedną sprawę. No, przebieg konfliktu na Ukrainie pozwala na wyciągnięcie bardzo wielu wniosków dotyczących modernizacji technicznej sił zbrojnych. Nie tylko polskich, ale także wielu innych państw, praktycznie wszystkich. Nie chodzi jednak tylko o samą modernizację techniczną, ale też o zmianę doktryny taktycznej. Także chciałem pana generała zapytać, jak pan ocenia, w jakim kierunku pod wpływem konfliktu na Ukrainie będą zmieniały się zachodnie siły zbrojne, jak powinny zmieniać się zachodnie siły zbrojne, a także może, co ciekawsze, jakie są pana przewidywania co do tego, w jakim kierunku będą zmieniały się siły zbrojne Federacji Rosyjskiej?
That's a big question, and I think there is more that we don't know that we know. But after I said that, we can't leave it without an answer. So I would say, first of all, I would say that the leaders of the armed forces needs to believe in what they see in the battlefield itself as the essence of change. Sometimes big leaders in high ranking, they see things and they say, it's not a big thing, it's not an important thing. But basically, when we see those things, we cannot say that they not exist. For example, we suddenly see company commanders, which are captains or lieutenants, that they are doing a lot more things that when we used to be company commanders. Suddenly they are operating drones. Suddenly they want to have more intelligence. Suddenly they want to have their own fire to do their own operation. So things are changing in the battlefield, and we have to look at them and understand that they can do it. And it's not that we think that they shouldn't do it, because as Clausewitz says, the battlefield, it's a steakhouse of itself and things happening in it, and we have to embrace them and not saying, well, I don't know how they did it or it doesn't exist. In that matter, what we see, if I can give it in a way of thinking, is that the modern brigade is the old division, and the old division is like, and the modern division is like the old corps. So the capabilities are going down, which means that the amounts of weaponry and armament that all those forces will need it will be in huge amounts of numbers. If we used to have, for example, UAV only in the division level, suddenly we have it in a company level. And we have a lot more companies than we have divisions. So we'll have to have more of those things. And amazingly, this young generation can operate those things and do it very, very nicely job done on all the battlefields. So that's, I would say, one thing that we have to, that will keep on seeing the evolve of things, even I think up to the level of tactical cyber attacks, and not just strategic cyber attacks. So it will be also in the level of the battalion commander. And battalion commander will have his red button for cyber attack just before he goes to the attack. I know it's almost inconceivable, but we see that cyber attacks are so spread up that it will even go down. The second thing that we see that is in the return of the battlefield, and it will continue, is the fortified of the front. And it's a smart fortified of the front. So we suddenly see, again, the trenches. We see new mines battlefield. We see, again, the bulldozers. And we see they're trying to, in the battlefield itself, to stop the maneuvering for each side. But the fortification became new ones with the capabilities that we see. So suddenly you have unmanned capabilities in the fortified, you have better intelligence in the smart fortified, stuff that are coming. And that's a big change because I think people stop thinking that in a war there is a fortification. Like it's, who needs it? But it's needed, it's working. It stops the enemy from moving freely from side to side. And although I would say civilians, people don't like that we are playing with the ground, but that's the reality that armed forces need them. The third one, I think, is the evolvement of the domains of war. So I would say two that are totally changed. First of all, the space domain, which is already being thought about, but we are really sensing it. There are space operation in order to enhance other domains. If the company commander needs a satellite to talk, that's an operation. And we start seeing satellites fighting satellites in the space. Some of it is on the news, some of it is not in the news. But the space domain and the capabilities of being able to be present in the space effectively is very, very important for the new battlefield and enhancing all other domains. The other domain that is very, I would say, was unthinkable at the beginning is the cyber warfare and the connection to the information warfare. So those are both things that are very linked. They used to be think of as separate things, like we have information, okay, we'll talk about it in the television and we'll do something. But no, cyber took the information warfare into the intelligence system themselves. Suddenly you don't know if the GPS reading that you have is the real GPS reading that you have. So that has to be, for example, a cyber attack. So the combination between information and cyber warfare in the C4 systems of the armies, those are, this is a very new thing, and it will keep on evolving up to the level that when, let's say, a brigade commander talks to a company commander, does he really talk to him? Is it really him that gives him the order? Are the orders that he got written are the right orders? So I would say those are the biggest changes that we see. I would say the last one that people usually don't talk about it is the supply chain, the change during the war. And when I'm talking about supply chain, I'm not talking only about materials and munition, because we see here munition that are coming for example, for Ukraine from the west to Ukraine, and to the Russian front we see from North Korea and Iran that are sending there. But I'm also talking about manpower itself. We see North Korean fighting in the front. We see special forces that are fighting in the front for Ukraine. So in that manner, I'm urging every country to think what happens when it exhausts its materials, also of manpower and materials, and where does it bring the other things that will help it to sustain the war, because war getting longer because it's hard to get a decisive winning because of the development that we talk. So in that matter, they will have a hybrid warfare, and they will have to rethinking about the chain of supplies that enables them to conduct their strategic war.